Welcome to Money Matters Monologue as we go beyond the headlines. I'm your host, Dr. Roger Richardson, your community resource and economic development specialist. And today's topic is BRICS versus G7. Who will rule the world? Let's jump right in. The BRICS Wealth Report. Henley and Partners presented this report challenging the global economic order. The basis of the report is that 45 trillion USD is what now the BRICS countries hold in wealth. This is a staggering amount when compared with the G7. The tremendous and pace of growth in the BRICS wealth holdings are astronomical, and it presents a geopolitical challenge to the former world order in that all economics and the ability to challenge the global economic system, to direct resources, to order the rules of the global system are now under threat. And it's a threat to some, but it's an opportunity to others. What's pushing this thing? Well, when you've got countries like Russia, who is now one of the most sanctioned countries in the world, teaming up with other countries like Iran, who is also one of the most sanctioned countries in the world, teaming up with China, who is being placed under tariffs and sanctions, not necessarily because of the things they've done are so unique and different from other countries, but because they're posing an economic threat to the world order, and an economic threat outside an economic powerhouse, outside of the scope of the G7, outside of the scope of the existing Western world order is a threat. And so that's why we see so many sanctions, so many attempts to curtail growth, and no country wants their growth curtailed. And so there's this backlash, this push for growth under sanctions and tariffs and other things is allow these countries, or giving them the ability or the impetus to coalesce around an idea that perhaps the Western world order is not designed to meet their domestic needs, not designed to meet their safety, their security, their economic needs. And so what we see is BRICS welcomes new members in a push to reshuffle the world order. Alone, these countries did not have the power to challenge the G7. Yes, Russia is a nuclear power, but Russia's economy pales in comparison to the other leading economies in the world. It's equivalent in size or in population to Canada, and while it has tremendous natural resources, economically it doesn't compare to the United States. Well, when you put Russia and China together, and then you begin to add in other countries who also have power economically. Now you're creating a bloc that can challenge the world order, a bloc that can call shots, a bloc that can insulate themselves from Western sanctions and from military threats on their borders. So this is a powerful situation that's emerging in the world. And the question is, how have they doubled in size? And by size, we're not just talking about the number of new admittance into BRICS, but they've doubled in size with population. They doubled in size with capacity. They've doubled in size with economics. They've doubled in size with natural resources. Their expansion efforts were not done haphazardly or just on the basic of politics. Their expansion was done on the basis of geography, but also on what those countries could add to the mix of the BRICS organization. Let's look at it. BRICS expansion. I mean, they have expanded from what was originally just a few countries to a global powerhouse, including new members such as Iran, UAE, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, including Argentina. This is strategically moving throughout the globe, and they call it the global South. But as you can see from this chart, it's anything but the South. Yes, the inclusion of the South is strategic. Countries in Africa and South America, these countries are rich with natural resources, but they also have grievances against the West. This Western, what we call rules based order, has not really served every country equally. While it's called rules-based orders, in countries like Libya, Iraq, and other countries, they have grievances because the rules were not applied uniformly to all countries. And that's one of the things that are inspiring, not only wanting to insulate oneself from sanctions and other things, but also to have security in one's economy, security in one's government, that it won't be toppled just because of a political dispute or a social dispute. Countries want autonomy over their religion. You know, you see the West placing sanctions on countries based on their religious beliefs. Those countries that are Christian based, that won't allow certain ways of living and certain things that are popular in the West, those countries are saying, hey, we want partners. We want economic and military partners that won't try to dictate to us what our rules, our religions, our laws should be. But it's not just the members in this cycle, it's those who have applied. The countries that have applied also, when you start to look at them, I mean, you're seeing a wide range of countries all over the world, and they have key things in common. These countries, when added to the mix of those who are already existing, help to expand the population, help to expand the GDP, help to expand the oil production, help to expand the exports of goods. We're seeing an expansion of the power. And when these power centers, these sources of geopolitical power, are harnessed by the BRICS countries, you're going to see them be able to begin to call shots internationally, because we understand that military power projection is really a product of a country's economic capacity to sustain, a country's natural resources, a country's ability to produce goods and to dictate to the global economy what the terms and conditions are. And so this is an important change that is happening right before our eyes. Once again, I mean, we've got a lot of more news to cover, but don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment so we can engage in a conversation. Countries are clamoring to join BRICS group. South Africa says as Russia takes up leadership, countries all over the world are applying to be a part of BRICS. They're applying because it's not just a protest, it's an attempt to survive. They feel themselves under threat. They feel that at any moment, if they make the wrong move, their countries, their economies could be sanctioned. They could be cut off from SWIFTs. Their reserves could be held. I mean, never before have we seen a country's reserves held in this way. In this new order that the West, this rules-based order, things are done not necessarily based on a fair playing scale, a fair playing system. They're done based on who's aligned politically, socially at any given point in time. And as a result, people want political and economic cover. What would happen if one day the West decided to cut you off from the global banking system? Now you're unable to make transactions, to cut you off from access to currency. But that's what's happening. And to combat that, they're accumulating their wealth. They're adding powerful economic interests like Saudi Arabia, adding powerful countries with natural resources like Iran, powerful countries with military capacity to insulate themselves from what sometimes seems as capricious rulings, capricious applications of the rules-based order, the control that some nations have over the United Nations, over other entities, the IMF. When we start talking about currency, currency is a big issue. What is a BRICS currency, and is the US dollar in trouble? The BRICS currency is not, most of the currency today that moves between countries is a digital currency. And the BRICS currency will be no different. It will be primarily a digital currency. I anticipate there will be some printed notes possibly, but primarily it's a means for countries to trade between each other without having to use the US dollar, without having to go through the SWIFT system, without the threat of being put under sanctions for pursuing their own national interests, for pursuing their own religious interests, their own social and cultural interests. BRICS, 8 banks ban US dollar transactions. This is unheard of. We are in a global upheaval. The fact that the dollar, which has reigned king, is being banned by 8 banks around the world is an astonishing occurrence that everyone should sit up and pay note to, pay attention to. This is not something that's just normal news. And a large portion of this ban on US dollar has to do also with the way in which the Federal Reserve has used the dollar to subsidize United States growth. The way in which the West has used their currencies against the global South to have an unfair advantage, the ability to print money, to continuously print and print and print, to continuously borrow and to drive economic growth at times when the economy and the indicators are really not there to support it. The West has been able to print more money because it's in, when you look at France and what they've done in the Sahel region, when you look at how they've mandated that their former colonies must use the currencies that they provide and the exchange rate that they set. It's a way of extraction of resources, extraction of wealth in an unfair way. And so these countries are trying to move away from the euro, move away from the dollar, move away from French currency, move away from using currencies external to their local economy so that they can just get a fair trade for their resources, a fair price for the natural resources, goods, and services that they produce so that their countries can develop. Look at Nigeria. Plans to sell oil in local currency, not US dollar. They want a fair price for their natural resources so that they can build airports and roads. And as long as they're using external currencies, that gives these external entities control over their economy, and that puts them at the whim of the Federal Reserve. And right now, when we look at the Federal Reserve, when we look at the debts that the United States is accumulating, when you look at its deficits, it's staggering that a country could continue to accumulate the type of national debt and to run the type of annual deficits that the United States is running. And at some point, that's going to hit a wall. And they're saying, hey, we want to get off of this train before it crashes. Egypt officially ditches US dollar for trade. Another country. These countries are doing the same thing. They are moving in a way that insulates them and strengthens their local economy. I don't think it's as much. And I think sometimes we have to be careful when we present things as a challenge to the West, or this is all of the countries. Egypt has been a longtime partner of the United States. So has Saudi Arabia. But these countries have domestic interests. They want their economies to grow. They don't want to have threats over their head, and they want to have fair economic trade, fair trade with the various countries around the world. And they don't want to be told who they can trade with, who their friends should be. And so I don't know if this is much a challenge to the West as it's an exertion of national sovereignty. We always hear about sovereignty. But why is it that countries in the global South shouldn't have a measure of sovereignty? Under the rules-based order, it allows the larger countries to dictate the game in a way that takes away the sovereignty of these other nations. When you look at the IMF stipulations, when you look at weapon sale stipulations, how they can be used, where they can be used, it's taking away the sovereignty of these nations. I want to thank you for watching. This is Money Matters Monologue. We're talking about some of the top issues in the day and how we as individuals can move within the global currents so that we make the best financial news. And I think BRICS is one of those news items that we have to continue to watch. Until next time, I always say, why swim against the current when you can ride the wave? Don't play the victim, play the game.